Okay, welcome to the show, folks. Just having a couple of little technical difficulties here with the Skype. No problem, sort it out in a minute. Just like to thank Lisa for another great show, as usual. Lisa's shows are always uplifting, to say the least, and you've always got content, and she presents them brilliantly. Well done, Lisa. Well, she won't be able to hear me now because she's gone out with friends, I think, to a pub quiz. She's abandoned us for the night. So hope she has a good night anyway. Just before I explain what's going on tonight's show, the jingle I just played for the conference, you probably heard earlier on Lisa's show. The tickets have been reduced to £10 a head now, £10 a ticket from £20. We did have a discussion about it, and we felt that with it being near Christmas and also the current economic climate, which is no fault of our own, people may be struggling with £20. Although if you look at the calibre of the speakers that are on the conference, you know, they're worth double that, maybe treble that. But as I say, we do understand that the financial situation of people. So we've decided to reduce the tickets to £10. Now, for me, there's no excuse at all for people not to be at the conference. Even if they live outside the area, I'm sure the surrounding areas, they can either share a car or a vehicle, train or coach, minibus, whatever. For me, the information, and this conference as well, it's not, I'm not just saying it because I'm at CMO, but it is not like other conferences, or certainly that I've attended or have watched, in the sense that all the speakers who appearing at the conference, they're providing solutions to problems. They're not rehashing and regurgitating information that we all do all the time, and we all know we can get off the internet and off YouTube. These people are giving information out, and at the end of it, they're giving solutions. They're not just there to sell DVDs or CDs or promote the next talk that they're going to be having or promote groups. They're not there for that. They're there to give information, important information that affects us in our daily lives, more locally and nationally than internationally. And at the end, they do offer solutions. As the two first guests I'm going to be getting up shortly, David Noakes and Albert Burgess, they're two of the speakers. They're going to be on the first hour of the show. And the second hour, we're going to have Rob Freeman and Rob Bollix, pardon my French, or Rob Bolio, as he likes prefer to be called now. But on the second part, that's four of the speakers that are going to be appearing at the conference, and each and every one of them provide solutions to problems that we're faced with today. So for £10 a ticket, I don't think anyone's got an excuse not to be there. It's going to be a great event. So what I'm going to put it. You can get the tickets via the web page, by the way, or contact anybody. My email is prisoner@criticalmassradio.co.uk, or any of the hosts or Paul, the station manager, or just go onto the web page and you can click your seat there. But the tickets, it may still say on the flyer there that they're £20, but the tickets are now £10. So tell all your friends. 24th of November, the Britannia Hotel Didsbury Manchester, from 11 till 9 at night, and great speakers. Okay, I'm going to play a song, and after the song, hopefully I'll have David Noakes with me. Hello, David, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So we just had a problem with the Skype there. I hope the listeners could hear us. I don't know whether it went a bit quiet, but you should be back on now. It's a little bit of a problem with the Skype. How are you, David?
Yeah, fine, thanks.
Thanks for coming on the show. I know you're one of the first guests I had on when I first started on the broadcasting. Yourself and Albert, who is in the wings waiting as well to come on a bit later on. So what have you been up to since the last time you were on the show? Can you bring us up to date?
Well, I've done a few updates on the website, and I'm getting ready for your conference at the Britannia Hotel in Didsbury on the 24th of November, when I'm very much looking forward to speaking and to meeting my old friend Albert Burgess again.
Yeah, he did, I was speaking to him last night, and I say he's waiting on the line now. He did say it'd be good to get together again, because I know we're both your friends. Just while I think on, David, because the Skype threw me a little bit, just for the listeners. David's website is eutruth.org.uk. Is that correct, David?
Yes, that's right. And of course, the thing that amazes me most of all is that people don't realise that the top politicians in the three major parties are bribed, owned and bought and paid for by the European Union.
Yeah.
And the bit that gets me is it's pretty obvious, because Westminster illegally spends 80% of its time implementing EU laws. Now that, of course, is illegal under our written British Constitution. The whole point about being an independent nation is that you make your own laws. You do not have laws imposed from abroad. And if you allow that, you cease to exist as a nation. And, of course, the EU successfully brought our nationhood to an end in January 2009 with the sixth and final EU treaty, the Lisbon Treaty. And of course, having had its laws dictated by the EU, has now ceased to exist legally under that treaty. Well, illegally, actually, of course, because they broke the British Constitution to implement that treaty.
Yeah, it goes back to 1972. It's had his, doesn't it? The first treaty was signed 72, 73, when what was called the Common Market then.
Yeah, but
we were conned into it.
The amazing thing is, that the people can see that that Westminster is doing 80% of its time on the European Union. They can see the 120,000 EU regulations that have also come in. They can see Westminster signing EU treaties. And they can see that they didn't vote for any of that. And yet it's never occurred to the average British person that their top 17 ministers are bought, owned, bribed and paid for by the European Union. Why else would they be illegally doing EU business in Westminster?
Yeah, I think people need to realise how serious the situation we're in, because this country is under occupation for all intents and purposes. Our sovereignty has been ceded by these treasonous politicians of all parties and of all colours. It's not just one party that we can point a finger at. It's all of them. They're all collaborators in it.
Well, I mean, you cannot be Prime Minister of Britain these days unless you are a Bilderberger. And of course, the Bilderbergers are the 140 strong ultra senior Freemasons whose job it is to build the EU dictatorship. Angela Merkel is the most senior and the most obvious. But in England, the top senior Bilderbergers are Ken Clarke, who is the most senior Bilderberger, William Hague, who is second, Francis Maud is third, Cameron is a relatively junior Bilderberger, but George Osborne is the most junior. Nick Clegg is the only Bilderberger in the Lib Dems. And in Labour, you have obviously Tony Blair and Brown are Bilderbergers, but both Miliband brothers, David and Ed, are Bilderbergers. So is Ed Balls and Peter Mandelson. Yeah. And these are the bribed traitors who are abolishing our nation today. Back in Ted Heath's time, of course, obviously Ted Heath himself was the first Bilderberger Prime Minister, but even Sir Alec Douglas Hume and Reginald Maudling were Bilderbergers.
Yeah.
Keith Joseph was a Bilderberger. And people keep voting these bribed traitors back into office by voting Conservative, Labour or Lib Dem. So, the EU is a dictatorship. If you read the Treaty of Lisbon, it sets up a 3-tier Politburo dictatorship with a sham parliament in Brussels that has no power. And the constitution of this Soviet Europe is in the 6 treaties, which are actually worse than the constitution of the Soviet Union. So the normal place for mankind is slavery. We had slavery under the Roman Empire, we had slavery under the Holy Roman Empire, then we had the British serf system, and then the Germans experienced a brief bit of slavery under Hitler. The Chinese have had it under Chairman Mao, the Russians have had it under the Soviet system. So out of the last couple of thousand years, we've only had about 200 years of democracy, and that is now coming to an end. And the EU has 2 junior sets of foot soldiers in England, and that is senior Freemasonry and Common Purpose. Common Purpose delight in the fact that they are going to be allowed to rule local councils and government departments in what they proudly call the post-democratic era. And people don't realise that by voting for these 17 treasonous politicians, by voting for their Labour, Lib Dem and Conservative parties, they are voting for their own slavery. And they have already witnessed, although most of them never bothered to take any notice, the abolition of their nation.
Yeah.
And of course, there are 200 Frankfurt School subversion techniques at work in England, and one of them is the dumbing down of the populace and the removal of serious news and debate from television. So television now pumps out the X Factor, wall-to-wall football, and umpteen celebrity programs like Come Dancing, instead of reporting what is actually happening and reporting on, for example, the EU treaties. I mean, 50 years ago, the BBC would have done brilliant documentaries on the EU's 6 treaties and warned the public that it's the abolition of Britain, it's the abolition of democracy, and it's the beginning of slavery again after 200 years. But the EU and our 17 bribed politicians, of course, control the BBC, and this is a Frankfurt School subversion technique to dumb down the people and keep the documentaries and the real news from them. And the BBC actually has 400 common purpose people on the inside censoring out anti-EU news, and we have their names. And I used to work there. And all the BBC's transmissions go out through the German Siemens company. The BBC cannot transmit one word without the German Siemens company's say-so. And that is how complete how completely the BBC has let us down. And the organisation is so corrupt. It wastes about $8 billion a year now when it needs 800,000. It has 27,000 employees when it needs about 2,000. And it's so corrupt the BBC really needs to be closed down. There's nothing else to be done for it. What do you think of that?
Yeah, totally agree with regards to the news. If I look for any news, I have to go to the likes of Russia Today or the Rail News Network to get news about what's happening, with not just within the government or the state or the establishment of my own country, but in general. I have to go to a foreign news channel to get news of what's happening in my own country, and that to me is scandalous. And it's just to clarify for any of the listeners, I'm sure they picked up on it, but when you said the German Siemens company, you are talking about Siemens, the electronics company.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just in case anybody thought it was like the Siemens mission. And with regards to the voting as well, and I go on about this all the time. For me, I've got no dog in the fight. I don't vote, and I don't believe in the nonsense over saying you're giving up your vote. For me, it's a game. The electorate and the politicians, and like any game, if one side doesn't turn up to play, then it's game over. There's no game. And for me, it doesn't take that many numbers in the next general election. It only takes a couple of million or so to turn it into a void election. And then if they call another election, the same result comes about. If people just refuse to vote for any of them, because all we're doing, the likes of the American election that's just gone by, is that we're not voting for anybody that we want. We're voting for the person that we don't want.
Yeah.
I.e. the one, the lesser of two evils, or
Yeah.
the evil of two lessers, whichever way you want to look at it. And for me, that's no democracy, that. I don't take part in it. I don't wish to take part in it.
Yeah. I mean, UKIP, of course, is too small for them to bother to put a bribed Bilderberger in charge. So the way they sabotaged UKIP, or they did when I was a member, was the company had Freemasonry regional organisers like Malcolm Wood, and it had a lot of common purpose people inside who created fighting so the party could never do anything useful.
Yeah.
And Malcolm Wood actually rigged elections to make sure that I couldn't. I mean, I did stand for the leadership of the UK Independence Party, and Nigel beat me. But I then stood for the very humble post of chairman of my local constituency, and 3 times Malcolm Wood turned up to rig the vote to make sure I didn't win. And I left the party at that point. And of course, the BNP is controlled by the Nick and Edgar Griffin Freemasonry family. Nick Griffin is a very senior Freemason, but his dad's even more senior. And they control the party, and their job, on behalf of the European Union, is to make sure it fails. And if you saw Nick on any questions, which was the best chance he ever had on TV to say something useful, just to say, the EU's a dictatorship. No, he threw the whole opportunity away. He threw the programme by just saying, well, I've been vilified. No, I've been vilified. Yeah. It's complete and utter waste of his position.
You're referring to question time there, David?
Yeah, question time.
Yeah.
With Dimbleby. And I've met the man twice, and he has absolutely no interest whatsoever in doing anything that will get Britain out of Europe, and he is a saboteur. So that's 5 parties. Now, Nigel Farage went round at the time I was trying to become party leader, saying that I was too extreme. I called the EU a dictatorship and a police state, and I could not therefore be party leader. But 4 years later, he was using my language in the Parliament in Brussels with devastating effect. And he now makes absolutely superb speeches, which you can see on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I take my hat off to him now, because he's at last got it right. Took him a long time to catch up, but he's got there now. And, more power to his elbow. But I have to say, he has never organised the party, as I would have, to fight campaigns with using the membership, which is why the membership keeps falling off. Got up to 30,000 one time, but the party never gave them anything useful to do, except argue. So they left, and, it sort of dropped down to about 10,000. It goes up and down a bit, but it should be millions by now. But because the party's sabotaged, it never really got very far.
Yeah, if you look at the percentage, if you go by the report and the percentage of people who want out of the EU dictatorship, and then you mirror that with the numbers, as you say, that UKIP, you'd think that UKIP would be way up there, really pushing, probably excelling the Liberal Party by now, and pushing the main two parties, because...
But no, hang on a minute. Basically, the Conservative Party was always the patriotic party and the party of the nation and independence and all that stuff. So UKIP should have overtaken the Conservative Party. But of course, what's actually happened is UKIP's been sabotaged from within, and they've never got anywhere. And the Conservative Party, of course, is controlled by the EU from the top.
Yeah.
So they just keep implementing EU laws, policies and treaties and regulations, but at a rate of 3,500 a year, which is completely illegal. And of course, one of the Frankfurt School subversion techniques is to make us pretend, is to make us believe that we don't have a written constitution.
Yeah.
We do, of course. We have one of the longest written constitutions in the world ever since Magna Carta, and that, of course, is a lie that they keep trying to perpetrate, but it's unwritten. But under our constitution, everything the government's doing is illegal. And of course, one thing that everyone always forgets is the simple fact that 95% of all crime is committed by government. And I'll just give you a few examples of this. They invaded Iraq on the basis of government fraud about weapons of mass destruction they knew did not exist. And over 1 million Iraqis are now dead. So it doesn't matter whether you call that a crime or manslaughter, it doesn't, or murder. It's still illegal. And that is why our Bilderberger Foreign Secretary, William Hague, is so desperate to silence the chief prosecution witness, Julian Assange, whose WikiLeaks website has published the documentation that convicts them. It used to be gangsters who silenced witnesses, but William Hague is a gangster attempting to sabotage the criminal prosecution of other Bilderberg ministers who went before him. In particular, the likes of Tony Blair and John Major, who is involved with the Carlisle Weapons Corporation. So all of these people should already be behind bars.
Yeah, it is a gangster system, and I've said it before myself. It's a mafia. The only difference that I can find between government systems and the mafia systems is that the mafia do have honour. They have a certain amount of honour. But these people have no honour at all, do they?
Yes, that's right. And they are not like us. You can't want to abolish your nation without not being like ordinary people, which is why there is such a high incidence of paedophilia in government ministers, and why so many of them are really nasty people, like that Blake Mitchell, who was shouting at the policeman. Who he wanted, because they wouldn't let him through the front gate, he had to go through the side gate of number 10 like everyone else. They are not like us in any way. I mean, Edward Heath was a homosexual who had a house in Broadstairs worth £6,000 with a £3,000 mortgage on it. After he signed the first EU treaty, the Treaty of Accession, he suddenly bought a £3.5 million mansion in Salisbury and spent £1 million on his yacht Morning Cloud and the Admiral's Cup races. And that was his bribe for signing the EU treaties. And it's always money laundered to them. So in his case, it was money laundered to him as a peace prize, Nobel Peace Prize. Well, of course, he hadn't made any peace. And in Tony Blair's case, of course, he signed 2 EU treaties, so he got 2 £10 million bribes, and they were money laundered to him as a non-job at $4 million a year of Middle East peace envoy after he left office. Well, of course, he's never been to the Middle East. He's hated in the Middle East. He couldn't possibly be a peace envoy. And then, of course, there are banks whose chairmen are also Bilderbergers who organise it, that he gets another couple of million from a few banks a year for non-executive directorships, which is money laundering the rest of the 20 million.
Yeah.
And that is how our ministers are bribed. So each minister who's signed an EU treaty has made 10 million out of it. Of course, the most interesting case for all of them is Margaret Thatcher. Now, David Cameron, before he came into office and at his party conference, told a pack of lies. One of them was that he would have a bonfire of the quangos. Well, there are 8,500 EU-mandated quangos, which cost us 200 billion a year now, according to the Cabinet Office. And with the EU regulations, by the way, which cost us 100 billion a year, according to the government's Better Regulation Task Force. So that's 300 million, which is 20% of our entire economy wasted on the EU. And this always annoys me because people say, well, the EU costs us, 10, 11 billion a year, which is our contribution. No, it doesn't. It costs us 20% of our entire economy. Yeah. And is the reason, and that's a crime, wasting that money illegally. And, they tax us to death, which is another EU policy. And as a result of all this, millions of people in the former nation of Britain, because after the Lisbon Treaty it's not Britain anymore, are now impoverished as a result of all this government crime and trying to survive on £5 an hour. I don't know if you've got views on that.
Yeah. I covered a little bit of this last week with regard to the EU contributions from this country, and it always annoys me. And the papers have started it again today, and the news reports that David Cameron standing his ground against Angela Merkel and the rest of them, and not giving in to any more contributions or any increasing contributions, etc., from Britain. And it's absolute nonsense, because David Cameron is only doing his paymaster's bidders, which is the City of London, the people who put him in power, the ones who pay him and who he works for. He's only doing their bidding. He's put up as this, I'm a defender of Britain's Britain's interests.
He will only do what the EU allows him to do. So they will never allow him to abolish the quangos, because they are EU-mandated quangos. They are part of the method to drive us into poverty. The reason they want us in poverty is because in poverty we don't have the financial muscle to resist. We have to go to work and work ourselves to death so that we don't have time to fight the EU. That's why they want us in poverty. So he will never have a bonfire of the quangos. He will never have an EU referendum, because the EU will not allow him to. And Margaret Thatcher, of course, disobeyed the European Union. She was a naive Bilderberger. She had to be a Bilderberger to be Prime Minister. But towards the end of her reign, she realised that the Bilderbergers were about building a very nasty EU dictatorship. And she made her Bruges speech. And in less than a year, the 7 other Bilderbergers, particularly Sir Keith Joseph in the cabinet, and Lord Carrington, who was actually chairman of the Bilderbergers at the time, had her out on the street and replaced by a compliant Bilderberger, John Major.
Yeah.
So there's no way that Cameron can ever go against what the EU says, because he'll be out on the street, and he knows it. So he says all these lies. He says he'll stop immigration. The EU won't let him stop immigration. So there is no way he will. And of course, they've now got 25 million immigrants in here, figures that the government continually denies. But you've only got to go to towns like Leicester, Luton, Bradford, Birmingham, which, by the way, in the Middle East is regarded as the best Islamic city in the world, to see that there really are 25 million immigrants in England. And according to the Office of National Statistics, by the year 2025, even if there is no more immigration, the English will be a minority in their own country. And this is the superbly successful ethnic cleansing of the English by the European Union.
Yeah, it's what 2 world wars couldn't do.
Yes.
It's been done by stealth.
That's absolutely correct, yeah.
Ah.
And this, of course, is another one of the 200 subversion techniques. If you flood a country with immigrants, the country, of course, gets poorer because the wealth has to be shared out amongst a larger number of people. The number of jobs becomes scarcer because there's a lot more people to take jobs, and it's difficult to create enough jobs to go round, which is why we have unemployment. And, of course, salaries go down. And that has been a superb Frankfurt School subversion technique for the EU. And, of course, we've also lost our identity as a result. So what is the point anymore of fighting the EU and stopping it? Because we've lost our identity as English people, which is exactly what they want.
No. Okay, David, can I just take a short break there, please? I'm just going to put a song on, and while it's on, if I may, if you'll stay with us, can I bring Albert into the chat, please?
Okay, sure.
I'll be back about 3 minutes or so. Okay, welcome back, folks. With me is David Noakes, excuse me, whose website is eutruth.org.uk. And hopefully on the other line should be Albert Burgess, whose website is A Case for Treason, another previous guest of mine. Hello, Albert.
Hello there, George.
How are you?
I'm fine. And you?
Are you? I'm fine. I'm just going to introduce you to a chap you may know. David, are you still there?
Yes. Hello, Albert. Nice to hear you.
Hello, David. Long time since we've had a chat.
It certainly is, isn't it?
It is.
We'll put that right on the
24th.
On the 24th at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
Can I just interrupt there for a minute, just to let the listeners know what I think I mentioned at the top of the show, and yourselves, is that because of the way things are now with people's finances, we've decided to reduce the tickets from £20 a ticket to £10 a ticket as a goodwill gesture. So I don't think there's any excuse why anybody shouldn't be there at the Britannia Hotel Didsbury Manchester on the 24th of November. That's my plug over with. Carry on, gentlemen.
Well, Albert, it's your turn now, I think.
Is it?
I've said quite a bit.
Have you indeed? Well, yeah. Basically, what I decided to do a little while ago, 6 years ago, being a retired police officer, I see the answer to this in the law. It's either the law or a bullet, one or the other. I don't think there's any alternative, realistically. And I chose to try for the law first. So what we're doing is what I am doing is I am heavily into researching the history and development of the English Constitution. And then I look at what the politicians have done and are still doing, and where that breaches the Constitution. And, of course, if you breach the Constitution, that constitutes an act of treason. And, of course, the police force are supposed to arrest people who commit treason. And for some particular inexplicable reason, the higher echelons of the police force don't seem to want to do that. So what we're doing is we've decided that what we will do is we will go for the county police forces, get them to give us a record of for them to record the crime, and either give us a crime book number or crime-related incident number. But we want them to forward the crime report then on to the Metropolitan Police. And now there are 42 county forces, and the object of the exercise is to get all 42 to push it down to the Metropolitan Police. And that way it puts an intolerable amount of pressure on the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, because 42 chief constables will have said, look, this is a crime, you're better placed geographically and financially to deal with it, so deal with it. That's what they're doing, they're transferring it down. And I can tell you that so far and to date, and we've been running probably about 3 months now doing this, so far and to date, we have 8 separate individual police forces who have actually crimed these things and have actually sent them to London for investigation. So, you know, the plan is working. I've always said from day one that this is going to take time, and it is a numbers game. You know, I've always said this, it is a numbers game. And until we get the numbers, we are not realistically going to get a result.
By numbers, you mean lots of people going into police stations?
I mean lots of people going into police forces and putting pressure on their police forces. Now, the other thing that we're doing, of course, because we now know, don't we, that the government want to privatise the police, and we also know that they want to get rid of the police authorities and bring in these crime commissioner things. So what we've done is, initially when they started talking about privatising the police, we wrote to every single chief constable, we emailed every single chief constable and said, look, we are the people who pay the taxes that pay your wages, and we are telling you that you are not to accept privatisation. And I put this out on the internet, and it went all over the country, and then people were emailing the chief constables. But we also sent it to the police federations, and every police federation in the country was emailed, and they had thousands of emails. And I know they had thousands because I walked into my local police federation, which is about a quarter of a mile, 10-minute walk away from where I lived. So I walked in there with a copy of the letter that we'd sent out as an email and handed it to the man personally. And he said exactly what I've said. You know, we are the people who pay the taxes to pay your wages. Ultimately, we employ you and you work for us. And we are, as your employer, instructing you that you are not under any circumstances to agree to any kind of privatisation. About 3 weeks after this, and when I went in with my letter, the man I spoke to from Thames Valley Police Federation, he said to me, he said, you know what, he said, the Police Federation have been absolutely gobsmacked at the absolute level of support, because the one thing I'd said in the letter is we must make it clear to the police that we support them. We are not their enemy, we support them, and we want to support them in whatever they do here, but we want them to do what is best in the long term for the country and for us. And he said to me that every single police federation in the country had been absolutely amazed because they had been in receipt of thousands upon thousands of letters and emails, all telling them what I was asking them to say. So the internet is a great thing, I have to say. You put a letter on the internet, you ask people to send it to everybody on their list, and I'll send it to everybody on theirs, and if enough people do it, then we get letters sent to every police federation, every chief constable, instructing them what to do. It is pressure put on the police by the people. And what I say to people is, I want you to take ownership of a tiny piece of the fight back. If you can't get out and go on a march or parade or go and lobby your MP, you can at least write a letter and get that in the post, or send an email and get that off. But you are taking a tiny piece of the fight back, and that's what we're encouraging people to do. And so far, it is working.
Yeah, I think you're getting the results as far as I can gather, Albert, aren't you?
Well, we are very, very pleased at the moment. As I say, we've been going with the police at the moment over the treason allegations, and the particular allegations that we are making are twofold. We are reporting Tony Blair for subverting the constitutional arrangements of Parliament by removing the hereditary peers from the House of Lords. This has interfered with what's known as the internal cognizance of the House of Lords to determine how it conducts its own business and who sits in it. So nobody from outside the House of Lords can say who does or doesn't sit there. Tony Blair has done that. He said, you can't sit there because you're a hereditary peer. he is not constitutionally allowed to do that. The common law says he can't do that. So we're reporting Tony Blair to the police for high treason, for subverting the constitutional arrangements of Parliament by breaching the cognizance of the House of Lords to determine who sits in it. We're also reporting Cameron and Clegg because they want to, and they've gone public, they want to get rid of the House of Lords and have an elected Senate. So we're doing the same for them, and so far 5 police forces have actually accepted allegations against Blair, Cameron and Clegg and forwarded them to London to be investigated. The other one that we are doing is the Maastricht Treaty. John Major went to Maastricht with Hurd and Francis Maude, Douglas Hurd and Francis Maude. Hurd and Maude were the 2 plenipotentiaries. Hurd was Foreign Secretary, Maude was a Secretary to the Treasury, and they were the ones who actually signed the documents at Maastricht. Hurd, Major then came back, recommended to the Queen that she should actually sign this as a bill in Parliament. She then went ahead and signed it on the advice of her minister. That advice, in fact, was highly illegal and treasonable because it attempts the constitutional impossibility of making the Queen of England the Queen of the greatest royal household in the history of the world, a vassal queen to a group of criminal civil servants in Brussels. And that's what Maastricht does. So we're reporting them for high treason against Her Majesty directly. We're also reporting them because when they made Her Majesty a citizen of Europe, they purported to make us citizens of Europe as well. And that, in fact, is also forbidden by the Constitution. The Constitution is quite clear. You cannot surrender this country or its people into the dominion of being citizens of a foreign power or subjects of a foreign power or slaves, as we feel it would be, to a foreign power, unless everybody agrees. And, of course, there's nobody in this country with more than half a brain who's going to agree to that. So basically what we're saying is that this is treason both against Her Majesty and against the English Constitution itself and the people of the United Kingdom. And that's it. Now, I'm talking about the English Constitution, and I don't say the United Kingdom Constitution or the British Constitution, because there is no such animal. The Scottish Constitution is older than our Constitution because they were never successfully invaded by Rome. I mean, the Romans had little forays up there, but they didn't stay there. It was too cold for their warm blood, so they kept coming down again. And the Scots largely led an uninterrupted life, and they kept all of their own law. When King Edward I went up there to hammer the Scots and gave them a good kicking because they were raiding south of the border, he then came back down. His son then lost Scotland. Edward II lost it. We disposed of Edward II with a red-hot poker up his back passage because he was pretty well useless. And we put his son Edward III on the throne. Edward III went up to Scotland and trashed them again because, again, they were jumping over the border and raiding into the north of England. This time he captured the Scottish King David. The Scots refused to ransom their king, who lived like a king in the Tower of London for about 18 months. And then Edward got fed up with feeding him and looking after him and said to him, look, if I let you go, you will rule Scotland as a vassal king to me because I actually have captured it by deed of arms. So you will be a vassal king to me in Scotland and I will allow you to keep Scottish law. So the Scottish have their own constitution about which I know very little, other than the fact it's very similar to ours. But I'm not what you might call knowledgeable on the Scottish Constitution. And from day one, I've always said, you know, if you are Scottish, then look up your own constitution and you fight the battle in Scotland like I'm fighting it in England. Because I think it needs to be there. And when people like the politicians say, oh, of course, the British Constitution, there is no such animal. There's an English constitution, there's a Scottish constitution, and the only British laws, realistically, are the laws, the 1351 Treason Act, which Edward III insisted would apply in Scotland, and the Acts of Union. So those are the only real British laws. So basically, well, that's what we're doing at the moment, and it seems to be making progress, and we're actually quite pleased with the way it's going.
Oh, but just to backtrack just a minute, people might be thinking the way I did at one time with regard to the House of Lords. You may think, oh, it's just full of, you know, old fuddy-duddies who are full of whiskey and sleep. I mean, and I've had no effect at all. But what people need to realise, which I came to realise after my stupidity, is that they are the checks and balances on what goes on in the House of Commons, aren't they? So it prevents government railroading acts or legislation through.
Our forefathers were no slouches. They were, in fact, extremely intelligent men. And this shows it right across the whole spectrum. A medieval farmer, for example, produced very nearly the same crop an acre as a farmer in 1940. The farmers in 1940, they had modern fertilizers, they had modern equipment, they had tractors and everything else. The medieval farmer didn't have any of that stuff. If he was lucky if he had a horse to yoke up to a plough. But I mean, basically, when it came to writing our constitution, it was written by our forefathers as a result of trial and error. Every time a king, somebody like King John, for example, got out of hand, then it was the barons who initiated the fight back against the excesses of the king. But because the excesses of the king not only affected the barons, but also everybody else in the country, when we come to things like Magna Carta, which was signed at Runnymede, it wasn't only the barons, and we're all told in the school, of course, this was barons and King John, they were the only ones there and all the rest of it. That's pure unadulterated rubbish. The word got out that the barons were meeting up with King John at Runnymede, and thousands upon thousands of the freemen of England, who were all required by the law of the time to keep weapons in their house, bows and arrows. They were required to have swords, daggers, all sorts of stuff in there. They all girded up their loins, picked up their swords, their bows, and they all trundled off to Runnymede because they wanted this to be done. So Magna Carta at 1215 was not an agreement between the barons and the king. It was an agreement between the three estates of England and the king. And the three estates of England are the Lords Spiritual, which is the bishops, because there were bishops there, the Lords Temporal, who we would know as the hereditary peers, and the Commonalty of England, who would be the freemen of England at that time. And they were all there. So Magna Carta 1215 was an agreement between all of the reached between the three estates of England and King John representing the crown. Now, the crown is not the king. The crown is an office. And the holder of the crown varies because kings don't live any longer than the rest of us. And if they don't behave, a few have lived a lot shorter. But, I mean, basically, the crown is the office. The king or queen of the day is the incumbent holder of that office. So Queen Elizabeth is the current holder of the crown, the office of the crown. And the crown is unchangeable. It cannot be changed. It is a constitutional fixture which is immovable. It is set in granite. And there is nobody can actually change that. When Oliver Cromwell killed King Charles I, and then we had a republic for 11 years, when King Charles II was invited back, he did not, in fact, have to repeal any of the laws made by Oliver Cromwell's Parliament, because none of those laws had the royal assent. And for 11 years, he had effectively been King of England, but living outside of England in exile. So when he came back, he just said, well, I don't need to repeal any of these laws. None of them had the royal assent. Therefore, none of them are the law. So the law of England is what it was when my father died. And that's what happened, because the crown remained intact, even if the holder of the crown was in fact forced into exile.
Okay, David. Hello, David.
Yes.
Would you like to come in? Any comments on that, or just a general chat with Albert?
I'm delighted at Albert's successes, and of course I would have liked, a straightforward a case for treason to simply say that the EU dictatorship and all its laws is illegal in England under the British common law, and all those politicians who have been involved in the illegal EU project have committed treason, and of course should therefore hang by the neck until dead, as our laws demand. And I would have liked a simple case against the EU and all those who had supported it. What do you think of that?
Well, basically, we did that over the 1972 and Edward Heath. That's what we did. The police rejected that out of hand and refused to move on that. So we had a slight change of policy. And what we said was, we'll go for somebody more modern, somebody more up to date, somebody who's still relatively in the public eye, and we'll see if we can work our way backwards to Edward Heath. And what we're doing is we're going for David Cameron, who's the Prime Minister today, Nick Clegg, who is the Deputy Prime Minister today, and I actually believe the most dangerous man in the country. I believe that Nick Clegg is a petulant, spoilt child.
Yes.
And I believe that Nick Clegg has an undue influence on what happens in government. And I think that Nick Clegg is so far into Europe that he represents a real and present danger to our security and everything else. I believe he's the most dangerous man in the country. So if we can actually arrange for Nick Clegg to be arrested and put on trial for high treason, that would make my day. And I believe that if we get that, I believe any English jury would have no hesitation in convicting the man at all.
No,
David Cameron, if we could do David Cameron as well, that would be good. And I really cannot see any English jury acquitting Tony Blair. No. Not for anything. I know that people will be told by the judge, whatever you know about this man, whatever you've heard about this man, you must put it to the back of your mind. But I think that everybody has such a poor opinion of Tony Blair, and they all think that somebody should shoot him or something, then in point of fact, I think that he's going to be convicted out of hand. So that's what we're doing at the moment. It's not that we're ignoring Europe, because we're not. And in fact, when we send up our reports to the police, we do mention the Heath treasons and all the rest of it, and the Europe and our membership of Europe is completely illegal. We do mention that, but that's slightly on the back burner because we're going for more modern politicians, more prominent people in the eye today, because we think there's more chance of actually getting a result with them.
I think that's a very cunning plan.
Yeah.
I'm drinking a glass of wine now to get over from that very depressing.
You've had a glass of what? I'm sitting here with a glass of rum, actually, David.
Well, I'm drinking tea, so something's gone wrong here.
The last song was so depressing, I had to do something. What we need is "Won't Be Fooled Again" by The Who. That's the best revolutionary song of all.
Yeah. I was going to put it on, but it's 8 minutes long on the track I've got, David. I put it on the last time. Over 8 minutes long it is, so it's also.
Well, you could play a bit of it.
Yeah, that's right.
I can sing it for you. Get my guitar out and I'll sing a bit of it for you.
Yeah.
And anyway, Albert, I'm really heartened to hear what you're doing. I mean, I didn't realise you'd changed tack like this, and I've got to say it's a very smart thing to do, and congratulations.
Well, I've given this a considerable amount of thought. I do a considerable amount of research, and I spend a small fortune on books to do the research from, because I don't want to keep running back and forth to the library and ordering books and waiting for months for them to come in. And I'm very lucky that just down the road from me I have, and I'm going to give a plug to Oxfam here, I have an Oxfam bookshop. And wherever I go in the country, if I see an Oxfam bookshop, I nip into it. And I have never yet gone into an Oxfam bookshop and not come out of it with a history book or a book on English constitutional law, which is old and which is interesting. I have never, ever done that. And I find that they are an absolute resource. And in fact, I phoned the Bodleian Library in Oxford and I said, do you have this particular book? And they said no. And I phoned the British Library in London and I said, I'm interested in getting this particular book. Can I come in and have a reader's pass to come in and read it? And they said, well, we haven't got it. And I walked into my local Oxfam bookshop 2 weeks later, and there it was on the shop for $4.99. So I bought, so the Bodleian don't have it, the British Library don't have it, but Oxfam in Tame had it. So I think they are excellent. And I would advise anybody, if you want to buy books to do your own research and do that, then go and look. And some very good history books, if you want some names, Castle's English History, A Short History of England by John Richard Green, Blackie's History of England, that's very good. David Hume, I'm not really a lover of David Hume because he's Scottish and he doesn't like Queen Elizabeth I for some reason. But he is a very much quoted historian who wrote his books in 1760 or something, so they're quite old. But I have them, and they are really well read books. They read really well. They are interesting. What's more important, of course, that the actual drawings in the books are excellent. So if you get a picture of Boadicea, it actually is a beautiful picture of Boadicea. And you can actually do it. And in fact, in the book that I wrote, most of the pictures I were actually scanned out of Castle's English History. I have to say that, and were put into my book because my book is the Castles I have is Victorian, so the old copyright is out on it. So, but we do give them a mention. But I mean, they are excellent books, and as I say, Oxfam bookshops. If you want to buy old books, go to Oxfam for God's sake. But the one thing that you have to do, and I look at this as, because my wife hates my books, she says they're dust collectors. I say, books contain knowledge, and knowledge is a weapon. If you use the knowledge that you acquire from the books properly, it is a weapon, and it is a very effective weapon. And that's what we need. We need effective weapons in this fight. We are at war, and I will stress this. This is a war for the survival of the United Kingdom. It is a war. And when people say, oh, well, as they do when I go and do my talks, oh, well, it's them, their peers, they've been sponging off the backs of us for a long time. I say to them, when the House of Lords was properly run, without any restrictions on its powers, and with all of the hereditary peers doing the job they were supposed to be doing, we, in fact, and this goes up to Queen Victoria, in fact, King Edward VII even, this country had an empire. Victoria was queen and empress. Edward VII was king and emperor. Yeah?
Yes.
It wasn't until George V came in and the House of Lords started being destroyed by having the Parliament Act 1911 brought in, which prevented them actually preventing a bill from going through. They weren't allowed to stop a bill anymore and chuck it out and say, no, this is rubbish, it's not in the best interest of the country or its people. it wasn't until Asquith did that, and Asquith was a Fabian, that in fact we lost our empire. And ever since 1911, in less than 100 years, we have lost an empire, and an empire on which the sun never set.
The wealth of a nation is entirely dependent upon the corruption of its politicians.
Yes.
And, of course, then we were the economically richest nation in the world. And as our politicians have become more and more corrupt, we have become poorer and poorer. But rather surprisingly, we are still about the sixth richest nation out of a world of 205 nations. And, of course, if our politicians carry on being as corrupt as they are, we will continue to drop very fast indeed.
My opinion at the moment, David, is that this country has a parliament which is worse and more corrupt than most third world dictatorships.
I agree.
I think there is no doubt about that whatsoever. They are more subtle, perhaps, in the way of doing it. They don't go out and take somebody and shoot them in the head and just inherit their house and their money. But nevertheless, they are inheriting the houses and the money. They are getting backhanders all over the place. Tony Blair, when he signed the first half of the European Constitution, we are told, because there are people who track this, I mean, I personally am not into money. I don't understand money. I've never got any, so I'm
corruption-free.
I mean, there's no point in me understanding what I haven't got. Tony Blair, we believe, was paid. Yeah, well, no, Tony.
Can't hear.
In the first half of the Constitution, another 175 million to be paid when he signed the rest of it. It never got signed as the rest of it. Gordon Brown did the Treaty of Lisbon, which was the European Constitution by another name. So we can only assume that Gordon Brown got the other 175 million. So basically, from Ted Heath, who was paid £60,000 to sell this country, we're going through, and every time our politicians sign a European treaty, you can guarantee that they get suddenly a lot richer on European money. But it's not European money, it's our bloody money that our politicians pay to Europe by the ton and then get back a few bucketfuls. And when you go down the road and you look at your local sports centre and it says this sports centre was paid for by European money, it's not European money, it's our money that we have sent to Europe, and they've given us just a tiny percentage back to build that sports centre. And that is the way it works.
But that is not the biggest cost of the EU. The biggest cost of the EU is the EU quangos at 200 billion and the EU regulations at 100 billion, and that's 20% of our entire economy. And that is why there are so many people living on £5 an hour, because the government has wasted so much of the money on behalf of the European Union.
What I would like to see, David, when we get this country back, and I say when, because I want to do this using the law. I'm a great believer in the law in this country, and I want to do it using English law, not European law, not foreign law. I want to use English law, which is the best and purest law in the world. And I want to use English law to get this. I don't actually, at the back of my mind, I don't believe that unless we can increase the number of people that we are have got doing this, have got actually reporting the treason and the like, I don't believe we're going to do that. I believe at the back of my mind that this will be at the result of a group of dedicated people going into Downing Street, into the Palace of Westminster, and just shooting everybody in sight and then starting the game. That is the way that I see this going. That's why I am desperate to come on radio shows like this to say to people, I want you to join me. I want you to help me, to help you to get back this country peacefully without blood all over the streets. I do not want to see blood all over the streets of England. We see enough of that in third world and Middle Eastern countries. We don't want it here. As far as I'm concerned, the bullet is the last resort. That is the last resort before we go under. And I want to use the law. And I want you to help me, to help you to fight back, to get this country back using the law. And if we use the law, there is no doubt in my mind that if we use the law and enough people insist upon the law being used, then we will win this one and we cannot lose.
And on that, can I just come in? Sorry, gents, but I've got to move on because I've got a couple more guests on. But just on that note, Albert, I totally agree with that. For me, I think if we can't sort this out lawfully, as you say, with the law that's already been given, not the legislation and acts from Europe, but with our law, our own law, then that's the way I see it going. And I certainly don't think any bright-minded person in the country wants to see it going that way. But it's heading in that direction if we don't get it sorted out. Can I just thank both of you for being on the show tonight. David, yourself, as always, a pleasure. And yourself, Albert. And I'll see both of you at the conference.
You will indeed.
You certainly will. Look forward to it.
Okay. And enjoy your wine. I'll just carry on with my cup of tea here. And you both enjoy your glasses of wine.
You poor soul, I'm sitting here with a whole new bottle of rum.
Rum and wine. Don't be telling me. Okay, thanks very much to both of you.
Yeah,
thank you. It's been a pleasure. Bye, David. I'll see you on the 24th.
Bye, Albert, and don't drink that tea too fast, George. I hate to.
Yeah. I could just ask you one more favour, if you will. Both of you, can you end the call from your end, please? I can't end it. This
okay, I will do that right now. Goodbye.
Thanks, Albert. Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Thanks, David. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of Critical Mass Radio. I believe in free speech for myself and for others, and I intend to reserve the right of free speech for myself and for others.
You're listening to Critical Mass Radio. Now it's our turn.
Okay, welcome back, folks. Just heard from David Noakes and Albert Burgess, two of the speakers on the Critical Mass Radio conference, our first one, 24th of November, Britannia Hotel Didsbury Manchester. Tickets at £10, been reduced from £20. I explained the reasons earlier on, but I don't think you're going to get a better day with the quality of speakers that we have there. Anywhere near that price. These people are offering solutions to all the problems, or not to all of them, but a great deal of them. Rob should be there. Rob Freeman first, from the Out of the Matrix show on Critical Mass Radio. Hello, Rob.
Hi, George. You okay? Can you hear me all right, mate?
Fine. Loud and clear, mate. Loud and clear.
How's my settings, George? Because I've sat on another pair of headphones, so is it too loud, or is it all right? Is it coming through okay?
Well, can I just ask one question first? What do you do with these microphones and headphones? Because you seem to have a different set or a different mic every time you're on air.
Every 2 weeks, mate. I forget where I've put them, and when I find them, I realise I've sat on them. So it's costing me a fortune, mate. It's costing me a fortune.
Yeah, you're sounding great, and I'll just see if Rob Bollocks is there. He should be. It looks like, oh no, it's still calling. He hasn't answered yet, so I'll keep trying. Let me just see if he's in the Aston group. He might be in there. No, I'll catch him in it as we go on. So, well, you know what the show's about, don't you, mate? It's basically it's a 2-hour promo. Really, I decided to do tonight for the conference because I thought I never had a guest lined up. Our Pippa's out tonight on a jolly with her friends, So we thought we've got 2 hours, and you and I were originally going to do a programme, which we will do in the future, about the occult and the Saturn occult, Saturn cult and rituals that are prevalent way up to the top in this country. I don't know, do you want to have a little talk about that before we go into other business?
Well, yeah, it's up to you, George. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, actually, because it covers everything, doesn't it, as you know yourself, and probably our listeners know as well.
Yeah, it's right throughout certainly throughout the constabulary, the politicians, certainly the judiciary with the gowns, etc. that they wear, the black handkerchief that's placed on or I don't know if they still do it now, mate, but I know they used to, didn't they, when they were, oh no, they won't now because of capital punishment's gone, isn't it, when they were, that was part of it.
Yes.
When they were pronouncing sentence on someone to be executed, obviously they don't do it now. But, I mean, all that was all part of it. The teachers, certainly in the colleges, in the black gowns, with the black cape, it's all related to the worship and the cult of Saturn. Now, you've looked into that, haven't you, a lot?
Yeah, and then, like you say, it's rife. It's not just the judges and blooming judiciary that wear these robes. If you look at it further, my old schoolmasters used to use it, and anybody who gets a degree nowadays, they've still got the black capes, haven't they? It's all symbolism for the planet Saturn. It was, I think it still is known as the Black Sun.
Yeah.
So yeah, as you know yourself.
Dark Star, yeah.
Yeah, the Dark Star, Black Sun, yeah.
And also there's, from what I've read, is that the rings of Saturn, the bride, when she marries, that's where the wedding ring comes from. It's from she's basically being betrothed to the god Saturn, where the jewellery comes from, the earrings, the bracelets, the necklace. It's all symbolic to the god Saturn, and obviously the Sabbath is Saturn's day.
Yeah, it's right. And any ring, really, where you've got, like you said, for wedding rings and stuff, and it's same for, the Olympics, and there's different, there's a car manufacturer that uses rings. Anything to do with a ring is symbolic of planet Saturn, yeah. Yeah,
one of the actual emblem of the Olympics, one of them rings is black. It's supposed to represent the continent, isn't it?
It's supposed to be the 5 continents, isn't it, mate? Yeah.
Yeah. I think in there, and I'm just trying to think of what the car company is.
Audi.
Audi uses the rings as well, isn't it? Yeah. It's absolutely everywhere.
It is.
And it goes, from what I can gather, it goes back thousands of years, the worship of Saturn. I think there's reference to it in Samaria and through to ancient Egypt, through the Levant, the Middle East, right up to the Knights Templar, who always popped their heads up somewhere along the line, and then onto Freemasonry and into the present day royalty and aristocracy. We only have to look at the coronation of the present Queen, as she's known allegedly, and the ceremony is absolutely full of it.
It is. I don't know if you're aware, George, but even the Christmas that we celebrate dates back to a Roman festival. I think it was called Saturnalia, the actual Roman festival back then. So even things that we take for every day that we don't never think about, they've got the roots deeply, buried in Saturn worship at some point.
Yeah, I think the Christmas where Christianity's half built on is from Constantine, from the Council of Nicaea in 425, I think someone will correct me, and Constantine was the Roman emperor at the time, but he was a pagan worshipper. He worshipped the god Sol, which Sol is the counterpart of Saturn.
Yes. And
because he was in two minds, his mother Helen had converted to Christianity through visions and etc., epiphanies, and basically please her, but to keep his own belief system, he merged Christianity, which is and the pagan god Sol, from Jesus into Sol, and the story of Sol as it is with Dionysus and Mithra, etc., with the Indian one with Buddha and Krishna.
Krishna, yeah.
All the stories the same. The miracles performed, born of a virgin, died on he was crucified, risen after 3 days. All the stories, and I know you're aware of that, are all the same. So what Constantine done was basically made the two parts of his beliefs, if you will, into one, and that's why we get Christmas Day on the 25th of December, which has got no relevance in any historical fact to do with the story of Jesus Christ, if it ever existed anyway, but it's to do with the worship of Sol, because that was his story. He was born on the 25th of December, and the Easter tradition, etc., etc., it's all based around Sol, and that's why our day of worship, or what, not ours, but any Christian's day of worship, is a Sunday, because it's Sol's day.
Yeah, George, this is... Oh, sorry, mate. This is right up my street, this sort of stuff. I've been doing this sort of stuff for years, yeah. And you are quite right. The Jesus myth, as I call it...
Yeah.
Excuse me. I've got a bit of a cough lately, George. I think it's them chemtrails.
Couldn't be the ciggies, could it? No, it's the chemtrails.
I know it was that. Yeah, they're obviously contributing. Yeah, the Jesus myth, like you quite rightly say, I can name, I think altogether there's about 25 other deities that share the exactly same story with Jesus. Like you said, you know, born of a virgin and all the other stuff. But you're quite right. From my research, which I've been doing this sort of stuff a long time, everything relates to either solar worship, obviously sun worship, Saturn worship, with a bit of moon goddess thrown in there, which is just the female expression of the sun.
Yeah.
And like you say, Christians celebrate on Sunday. The Jewish faith, who don't believe in Jesus, obviously, they celebrate it on Saturday, don't they? Saturn's Day.
Yes, Sabbath.
Yeah, but and like
Sabbath.
you said, yeah, Sabbath. Jesus actually means yes, son. Jesus Christ means yes, son, and Christ, as we know, is the Christos, is the oil. Anointed one. So yeah, it's fascinating, and the average Joe on the street, he just won't have a clue, would he?
No, when you start explaining why things, especially in Christianity, I mean, there's a lot of it in Judaism and in Islam as well, but the actual Christian story, when you start explaining it through astronomy, or astrophysics, we call it. Is that the right term for it? No?
Well, it's astrotheology.
Astrotheology, sorry, yeah. And the likes of the birth of Christ, where they say, or the death of Christ on the cross, which is the Southern Cross,
yes,
in the sky. When the sun gets to a point on the 21st of December, on its lowest point on the horizon, it stays there for 3 days, then it starts its cycle again to rise, and so basically what it says is the sun, S-U-N, dies for 3 days, it stays where it is, doesn't move, and then starts its cycle again on the third day, which is the 25th, so it's reborn again. It dies on the 21st and is reborn again on the 25th to continue its cycle, and that is where that story comes from, and that at that time, the focal point is the Southern Cross. So the sun does die on the cross at the S-U-N. If you basically transfix S-U-N to S-O-N for the story of Jesus and use astrotheology, then it makes complete sense.
Yeah, I've actually done talks on this, George, and I'm glad you know about this, because a lot of people don't know about this, and you're quite right. The sun at its lowest point, it's the only time throughout the year it remains stationary for those 3 days, isn't it?
Yeah, it does. 3 days.
And each time it moves is 1 degree, which is the 360-degree circle days of the year. It's slightly more because it's slightly off its axis, planet Earth. Yeah, but like you said, Jesus, light of the world, whatever, and yet all it is it's symbolic of, as you know, as the sun rising, and same with the devil and stuff. Sunset. There was a devil that was feared many centuries ago, called Set.
The Egyptian god Set.
That's right. And all it basically is it's the raising of the sun and the setting of the sun. But if we go back even further to to Horus, again Jesus is Horus. The story is remarkably similar, and that's the hours in a day. The 12 steps of Horus is the 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness. So Horus, if you change the lettering around, it's the 12 hours, 12 hours a day and 12 hours a night. Yeah, so it's all they've all changed names and they're all different deities and they're different cultures and religions, but it all boils down to, like you quite rightly said, is astrotheology. For instance, Peter, who was Jesus' right-hand man, if you like, well, look at the planet Jupiter, a Jew called Peter.
Yeah.
Many myths say that the planet Jupiter cast Saturn out of its power, which is symbolic of the Jew Peter helping the son Jesus to cast Satan, because Saturn is Satan. So it's quite fascinating stuff, isn't it, how it all fits in?
Yeah, and it's not like a lot of other theories, if you will, where there's very loose links to, I mean, I've heard some trying to explain things, but with the planets and the positions of the planets, the stars, the Earth in relation to the planets and to the sun, it matches up perfectly, right the way through to the ages, as we were discussing the other day. We're going into the age of Aquarius now. From Pisces, the water from Pisces,
yes,
the sign of the fish, into Aquarius, the water bearer. And I think there's a passage in the New Testament that says when Jesus is saying to his disciples, I'm not going to be around much longer, and he said, well, where will we, but you will see me again, basically. And he says, where will we find you? And he says, look for the man with the water pitcher.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Which is Aquarius, is the sign for Aquarius, saying that this age, my age, is over, and the next age is the man with the water pitcher. But it all makes sense when you look at it from that angle.
It does, mate. And also some of the miracles Jesus supposedly performed, walking on the water, is just the light of the sun dancing across the top of the water. Turning the water into wine is just the sun with the grapes naturally growing. It's all symbolic, isn't it? It's just symbolic.
Yeah. The symbology in that, like, it's like a thread through from the Old Testament. For me, is a lot of stories that are put together through previous ages or previous civilizations, the Sumerians, etc., right the way through, because the stories are there, the Gilgamesh stories with Noah, etc. And there's a thread that runs through for me from the Old Testament that carries on, because a lot of people aren't aware that the Old Testament and the New Testament are two completely different books, but because they've been put together as one, as the Bible, the book, then people tend to think, oh yeah, this is a carry on from the Old Testament to the New Testament. It's not completely different, but there is an underlying thread of the symbology going from the ancient civilizations right the way through to the period of Jesus, if you will, that period in time. But the religious symbolism, it just carries on. It's a thread, and it still carries. It remains to this day. We can point out hundreds of symbols that are still used to this day. No more prominent than the old CNI or the pyramid with the floating capstone above it.
Yeah,
we know all about that.
Just going back to this the Old Testament, George. You are right. I was brought up. I had to go to a Catholic school. From junior school and from later on in senior school, and the Old Testament, like you quite rightly say, it's a completely different book, and the New Testament almost contradicts some of the stuff in the Old Testament, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's two separate books just stuck together, isn't it, and written a long time apart from each other.
Yeah, I think the way it was, for me, I've always said it's been contrived, and I think a lot of our history of actually who we are as a being and our origins, everything about us is told in the Old Testament, and we're taught to be, when the 2 books were put together as one, and the way we're taught either in school, Sunday school, through any religions that we have been brought up in, we've been misinformed. They've either been genuinely misinterpreted by scholars at times, or when we have been taught it, or when it's been read to us and interpreted to us by authority, then we take it as this can't be. This is absolute nonsense, because the stories that are being told couldn't happen. I.e., nowhere with one of each animal, which it doesn't really say in the Bible, but we won't go into that. But one of each animal of every species on the planet in a boat. Now we can't comprehend that yet. That's physically impossible. But as we've discussed, if you take it down to DNA size, DNA of every animal, it's already been done. It's been done to this day. But the way it's interpreted and given to us, that once we get old enough to realise, or to look back on them books or them scriptures, we go, that's just utter nonsense. And for me, that's deliberate, to keep us away from the truth, because I believe the truth in the Old Testament. I believe the truth of our origins is there, and I think they whoever it is, the power to be, put that onto us. So we won't. It's also very hard to read. It's the same as the way Shakespeare. Very, very hard to read, and I think that's been done deliberate as well, for people to go short attention span, especially in this day and age, and people go, "Oh, I can't be reading that." I think it's deliberate.
Yeah, I agree totally. The New Testament is encoded anyway, and like you said with the Old Testament stuff, the really strict Christians now say, "Oh well, you're not supposed to take it literally." But on one hand, some of them do take it 100% literal, and some don't now. And I think even they're starting to realise now. I mean, for instance, in the Old Testament, it's the gods plural. It's always the gods plural, isn't it? We made man in our image is the exact translation, and yet New Testament there is only one God. Yeah. So I think it's all encoded, and in my own personal opinion is that New Testament is based purely on astrotheology, position of the planets.
Yeah.
And the Older Testament, in my opinion, again, because I've done a lot of study on this, is basically deals with off-world entities from my research. I don't know if you agree with that, George.
Yeah, absolutely. This is where I come from, is that anybody can take a Bible now. The first book of the Old Testament, Genesis, there's only 5 books in the Old Testament. Take the first book. So, I hope that dog just wants feeding there, Rob. There's not nothing else going on. Oh, we're going to be off the air very, very soon.
He's trying to run off again.
I believe that...
Bless him. He's about 11 years old, mate. Sorry.
Yeah, no, this is the first book. Anybody wants to take a Bible up, look at the first book of the Bible, of the Old Testament, Genesis, and within, I'd say 26, 27 chapters of it, the certain parts, it actually it couldn't be any clearer. If you read it as a science fiction novel, and instead of putting where it says the word God or gods, because it does use the plural in our image, it says that, but also describes other alien entities, the Nephilim, the Watchers.
Yes.
They're all in there. All the other species of entities, whatever they are, whether they're alien or from another dimension or anything, are in there. They're in Genesis. And if you replace the word God with genetic scientist,
exactly,
and the whole story of Adam and Eve becomes clear, a genetic experiment. And also, when people say Adam is the first man on earth, Eve was the first woman. No, it says in Genesis, I think it's Genesis 26, it says that when their children, Cain and Abel, when Cain slew Abel, Cain is going to be banished from Eden. And he says, if they're you've only got Adam and Eve, then Cain and Abel, their children. So there's only them 4 there. Now, supposedly in the story that we've been given. Now, Cain says to God or whoever, don't cast me outside of Eden, because they will kill me.
Yes,
and it's the phrase.
Yes.
So obviously there's others outside of this compound, of this laboratory or whatever it was, and God says to Cain, you're going to be cast out of Eden, but let any of them harm you, and I will visit my wrath sevenfold on them.
Yes.
So the entity is actually telling Cain, yet there are ones out there, probably still in the Neanderthal state.
Yes.
Yet the genetic experiments has put Adam, Eve, Cain, Abel on a higher, as we are now, Homo sapiens.
They're genetically elite, aren't they?
Yeah.
Also, I know you've not got long left, George, so I'll not keep you. Also, yeah, you're right. It also describes the Old Testament of nuclear battles. There has been nuclear wars fought here, and that's what the rod and the staff that is so mentioned are, nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And the very first book that you said, Genesis, what is it? It's the genes of ISIS.
Yeah.
Genesis. It's all about genetic manipulation to genetic creation.
It tells you there. It tells you there in the title of the first book of the Old Testament.
It does, mate. It does.
Where we get genetics from, where we get genes, as we refer to, from it. It's all there. If people read it with a 21st century outlook on it, and as I say, replace certain, I'd say look at it as a scientific, sci-fi novel, and it's a genetic experiment, it does become clearer.
Yes, definitely.
For me.
We'll have to do this another time, George. Between us, we've got some great information there, haven't we?
Yeah, we were going to do a full show. We will do a full show on it. Or we might just while we're on air, it might be worth mentioning what we were discussing with Paul. There could be the start of what we refer to at the moment, a scratch title as a night owl, from 11 till early hours in the morning. We were talking about that, weren't we, with Paul?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Yeah, to go on a little bit later on into the night. And have a bit of a more, would you say off the cuff, a bit more relaxed, a bit like the same thing we're doing now? Yeah,
where we just, it may not be a certain host. The way our shows are structured now, it's my show tonight, it was Lizzie's show before me, etc. Your show on Wednesday. From 11 o'clock till 1 or 2, whatever, it goes on till in the early hours of the morning for the night hours, like yourself and me and a few others, and for a lot of listeners, is that it could be one Tuesday night, I'm available, you're available. Could be on a Wednesday, somebody else is available. So there's no structured, what we would say. It's just like an open forum. And whoever we may say, like the Ashton Meeting Group, a lot of them are night owls as well, they still play. And we could just go like that, okay, we're going to get somebody on now, or we could get callers come in. Paul did make an important point on it. 1, 2 o'clock in the morning or 12 o'clock at night is afternoon, early evening in the States.
Oh yeah, good point.
And you know, we could get some of the early evening listeners from across the pond joining in, or listening to the shows, because it's more or less prime time, early evening to them, later on to them, which would be like, let's say 12, 1 o'clock in the morning to us. But I mean, I don't mind staying up. I don't think if you would. I know you're not early to bed, are you?
Well, I think we stay up anyway, Rev, me and you, because I can see you online. We're both either studying something, aren't we? Or we've got our head stuck in something, haven't we, mate? Yeah,
or in conversation with different people.
You know, I get messages, it's late on now, so I can say, I get messages, people say to me, are you Rob Bollocks? And I say, no, he's another. I say, I'm just Rob that looks bollocks, because I never go to bed. I go to bed at 2 and 3 and get up at 7, so I just look bollocks all the time. So,
I still don't know what's happened to Rob Bollocks tonight. He's keeping himself under wraps, anyway.
If I know him, he'll be helping somebody somewhere. Somebody will have contacted him at last minute, like they do with me, and say, "Oh, can you help me out?" And knowing Rob like I do, he'll always come up with something. Yeah, he's a great bloke. He's gonna be great speaking at our conference.
Oh yeah, brilliant. Yeah, we've got we've got the last few minutes. I won't play out with a song. We'll finish the show off between us. Yeah, in the last couple of minutes. What do you think of the idea over dropping the tickets down to a tenner, mate?
Well, I can't believe that people would even question paying 20 quid anyway, but yeah, I think it's a goodwill gesture. It's a great thing, isn't it? And really, it's not about money. It's not about money for us, as we keep saying. It's not about money for what they've got to pay 20 quid or whatever. If I was on my own, or if I was just in small groups and I saw this conference being advertised, 20 quid, I think, 7 or 8 speakers for 20 quid, I'd just jump at the chance.
Yeah.
And I've paid 40, 50, 60 quid to hear 3 or 4 speakers. And like you said, I think you said earlier, George, they're just passing information on. They're not... The time for passing information on now and sending emails or getting on Facebook, that's gone now. That time's gone now. If you were passing information on now, if it's not got some sort of solution at the back of it, if it hasn't got anything viable to fight back, then it's not worth passing on as far as I'm concerned. And for 20 quid, 10 quid, whatever it is, I'd pay 50 quid to come and watch this if I wasn't involved.
Yeah, I said the same. Well worth it. It's well worth 68, 80 quid for the speakers because it's all solution driven. It's all solution based. The speakers that are on our conference are offering, like did Albert and David previously, they're offering solutions to certain problems. Yourself, Rob,
yep.
All the speakers are offering. It's not just regurgitated, rehashed. That we all do. All of us do it. I do it all the time.
Yeah.
But I'm not asking people to pay £60 to listen to me. Come and listen to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The conference is £10 a ticket. You've got 7 speakers, and it's all stuff that will benefit everybody that is in that room.
Exactly. I know we're running out of time, George, but ultimately it's going to help to get us free, all of us, and ultimately further down the line it may even help to save our lives from what we know is coming with this new world order.
Excellent. I can't top that. Okay, mate, I'll catch you later because the lady's going to cut me off in about 2 seconds, I think. Rob, I'll catch you later, mate.
Okay,
cheers for coming on. See you later.
Cheers. Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks, folks. That's me for tonight. Thanks for listening. Hope to catch you next Thursday. One minute we just say good night, God bless. Okay, folks, that was great. I can talk to the two of them all night. I'm going to play a quick song